I'm Jessica Smith, 26 years old, and for 2 grueling years, my parents spread lies to every employer in Tybee Island's tight-knit tourism community, claiming I was a thief. It wasn't about some grand heist, it stemmed from a single misunderstanding they twisted into a weapon to control me. I was qualified. I graduated with a 3.9 GPA in accounting and had glowing recommendation letters from my professors. But qualifications meant nothing when every door slammed shut in my face. I endured rejection after rejection, watched my dreams slowly crumble, and scraped by on minimum wage scrubbing motel rooms at dawn under Georgia's relentless sun. My father smirked from his resort office, but the hardest blow came from my mother, who casually said over dinner one evening, "Maybe now you'll learn to respect us." They believed that humiliation would break me, force me back under their control. What they didn't know was the secret lying in the shadows. A sealed envelope my grandfather had prepared 15 years ago, and the reason the CEO of Johnson Enterprises summoned me to Atlanta last week with a document stamped from my childhood. The moment I stepped into her office changed everything, opening a door I had never dared to imagine. But this was only the beginning. The real storm was still quietly gathering. If this story resonates with you, hit like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from and what time it is, because I want to know if anyone else has faced something similar. Now let me take you back to how it all began. 2 years ago, the Smith family projected an image of effortless perfection on Tybee Island. My father, Michael Smith, owned the largest chain of small resorts along the coast, each property boasting uninterrupted ocean views that kept bookings solid year-round. Our beachfront home sat on 2 acres of prime land, the garage filled with his Mercedes, my mother's Lexus, and my brother Christopher's BMW, handed to him as a graduation gift after he completed business school abroad in Florida. My mother, Ashley Smith, played the role of devoted wife, flawlessly hosting weekly seafood dinners where fresh shrimp and oysters arrived on silver platters, flowers from the local market arranged just so, and conversation flowed under soft chandelier light. Christopher, 4 years older, was the clear favorite from the start, positioned to take over the resorts, since he could first hold a conversation about occupancy rates. He spent hours with Dad mapping out expansion ideas, receiving praise for every suggestion, while I remained at the far end of the table passing dishes without ever being asked for an opinion. When Christopher wanted to study abroad in Florida, Dad wrote the check immediately, celebrating his drive and vision. 2 years later, when I asked about a similar program to broaden my accounting studies, Dad laughed it off. "What for? You'll marry well eventually and save me the money." I ended up at the State University in Savannah, commuting 40 minutes each way, stuck living at home, while Christopher returned with stories of new connections and experiences. Every family discussion revolved around him, his latest promotion, his ideas for upgrading the resorts, his future plans. Dad would raise his glass during dinner, toasting Christopher's potential, the words never once directed at me. I sat quietly, clearing plates afterward, invisible in the glow of their approval. One warm evening, I lingered just outside the porch overlooking the sea and overheard Mother talking to Aunt Samantha. "Daughters don't need big careers," she stated plainly. "They need to marry well and keep the home running." Aunt Samantha smiled and nodded in agreement, but her eyes flicked away almost immediately, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wineglass as Mother waved off one of my recent suggestions about streamlining the resort's accounting system. The gesture was small, barely noticeable to anyone else, but it stayed with me, a quiet signal that Aunt Samantha saw the unfairness yet chose not to challenge it. The resorts were the center of our world, symbols of the success Dad had built from scratch, yet that success came with invisible rules. Christopher received priority in everything from room assignments during busy seasons to introductions at local business events, while I was expected to assist quietly behind the scenes. Mother organized charity gatherings for the island community, inviting neighbors to admire our lifestyle, but I was always the one serving trays, never joining the conversations. The tight-knit island amplified the disparity. Everyone knew the Smith family dynamics, yet no one ever commented on the obvious favoritism, as though it was simply the natural order. Aunt Samantha came over frequently, sharing wine with Mother on the porch during sunset, but her hesitations became more apparent with time. She would glance at me during those visits, her expression carrying a flicker of sympathy mixed with deliberate restraint, as if speaking up would disrupt the fragile harmony everyone pretended to maintain. These accumulated moments planted a silent resentment deep inside me, one I buried to avoid confrontation, though it grew steadily beneath the polished surface. The ocean breeze seemed to carry constant reminders of the imbalance, yet I stayed quiet, learning early that questioning the setup only invited dismissal. Dad's empire thrived on tourist dollars, but at home the prosperity felt deliberately uneven, designed to keep certain roles intact. Christopher's casual mentions of future partnerships earned enthusiastic nods, while my ideas for cost-saving measures in the accounting department were met with indifference. Mother would smile at his anecdotes from Florida, her laughter filling the house, but my reports from the daily commute received only brief acknowledgments before the focus returned to him. The family's public image remained impeccable, dinners and toasts projecting unity, yet privately the cracks showed in every overlooked contribution. Aunt Samantha's averted eyes during that porch conversation became a recurring image in my mind, a subtle betrayal wrapped in politeness. That summer before college, the gift card changed everything. The summer before college, my parents handed me a gift card, meant for necessities, sliding it across the kitchen table with a quick explanation: books, supplies, whatever I needed to start strong. I was 18, determined to show I could be responsible, so I stuck strictly to the plan: textbooks for my accounting major, a reliable secondhand laptop from the campus tech sale, notebooks, a calculator, no extras at all. Over 3 months, the charges added up to $1,200. When the statement landed on the dining room table overlooking the ocean, my father erupted. He slammed the paper down hard enough to rattle the chandelier veins standing out on his neck as he roared, "Who gave you permission to spend this much?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "You did for school." My mother stood in the doorway and murmured, "Stay out of this, Ashley." But he shut her down instantly and fixed his cold stare on me. "You'll pay back every single cent, or you can find somewhere else to live." That ultimatum hit like a physical blow. I found 2 part-time jobs right away, one shelving books at the campus library, the other pulling weekend shifts at a coffee shop near Savannah, and worked 25 hours a week on top of classes and the daily commute. It took 8 full months to repay the entire amount, every payment tracked with receipts I kept in a folder like evidence in a trial. The extra load meant dropping courses to avoid failing, stretching what should have been a 4-year degree into 6. Tuition kept rising without a dime of help from Dad, and I stayed trapped commuting from the island, arriving home exhausted every night. Those years wore me down in ways money couldn't measure. Late at night in my room, I would lie awake, tears slipping silently, while I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I really was the burden they kept implying, if my drive for independence was nothing more than selfishness. The doubt crept in deeper with every paycheck that went straight to repayment, every missed social event, because I couldn't afford the time or the gas. Aunt Samantha stopped by one afternoon during those months, sitting on the edge of my bed while I folded laundry. She reached over, patted my hand, and said quietly, "Just endure a little longer to keep the family peace." Her voice cracked slightly, but she still wouldn't meet my eyes. Her hand trembled as she pulled me into a brief hug before leaving. The touch felt empty, another reminder that even those who saw the injustice preferred to stay silent rather than risk upsetting the balance. 6 years passed in that grind, semesters blurred together, each one a reminder that stepping outside their rules carried a steep cost. I finally walked across the stage, diploma in hand, but the delay had left permanent marks, lost momentum, accumulated frustration, and a hardened certainty that respect in our house was measured by compliance, not accomplishment. The whole episode eventually faded from their daily talk, but it stayed sharp in my memory, a turning point I couldn't ignore. I thought Grandpa's quiet warnings during our summers together were just talk until he was gone. My grandfather, Matthew Hayes, built a furniture empire from scratch, beginning in 1972, starting with one modest showroom and expanding it into 11 thriving locations across Georgia before selling the entire chain at 65 and retiring with enough to live comfortably for the rest of his days. Summers when I was growing up, I stayed with him in his quiet house near the dunes on Tybee Island, the porch facing the endless roll of waves that crashed in steady rhythm against the shore. He would spread financial statements across the weathered outdoor table, pointing to balance sheets and income reports while we drank iced tea in the late afternoon light. He taught me how to read every line, explaining assets and liabilities as if they were stories, then moved on to compound interest, using his own investment portfolios to show how modest sums could multiply over decades if handled with patience. "Knowledge is freedom, Jessica," he repeated, tapping his temple firmly. "No one can take what's locked in here." One afternoon when I was 15, as the sun turned the water gold, he took my hand and spoke in a low voice. "Your father will try to trap you the way he trapped your mother. I've planned something they can't touch." I remember rolling my eyes a little, thinking he was being overly dramatic, like grandparents sometimes are, full of old man wisdom that sounded big, but never quite landed. 3 years ago, Grandpa passed away at 78 after a brief illness, slipping away peacefully in his sleep. At the small service on the island, my father dismissed any talk of the estate with a shrug. "Just small gifts for the grandkids, nothing significant. Your grandfather was always sentimental about those things." I accepted his word without pushing grief clouding any instinct to question further. Graduation arrived in Savannah, my name called across the auditorium as I walked the stage in cap and gown, diploma fresh in my hand, a 3.9 GPA, and Dean's List honors every single semester. I scanned the crowd, hoping for some sign of pride. They were there, but clustered tightly around Christopher in the third row, laughing over something on his phone. When my name echoed through the speakers, their heads stayed bent together, no applause, no turned faces, only the empty seat in my chest where acknowledgement should have been. Outside afterward, my father approached with his usual clipped efficiency. "Nice job. Listen, I've got a proposition. Come work at the resorts. We need someone reliable on the books." For a fleeting second, my heart lifted. Maybe he finally saw what I'd earned. Then he added, "The position is unpaid for the first year. Call it an apprenticeship. You'll live at home, help your mother learn the business from the ground up. In a few years, when Christopher takes over, you'll be useful." Unpaid labor still under their roof, reduced to supporting my brother's future. I drew a slow breath and answered, "I appreciate the offer, Dad, but I'd like to try finding work on my own first. Get some real outside experience." His expression remained unchanged, but the light in his eyes hardened into something colder. "Fine," he said quietly. "Try it your way." He turned without another word and walked back to the car where Mother and Christopher waited, none of them glancing back. I stood alone in the parking lot, diploma still clutched in my hand, convincing myself the decision was right, even as a quiet dread settled in. Weeks later, the rejections started, and I knew why. Rejections hit like clockwork after graduation. I applied to every accounting firm in Savannah and Atlanta that served tourism and hospitality clients, customizing each resume to spotlight my 3.9 GPA Dean's List honors and glowing professor endorsements. Interviews felt promising. Hiring managers leaned forward, asked thoughtful questions, complimented my preparation, and ended with firm handshakes and assurances they would be in touch soon. Then the pattern repeated, polite form emails arriving days later, always the same line: "We've decided to proceed with another candidate." The rejections piled up fast, 15 in a row, each one chipping away at the confidence I had built over 6 hard years. Nights blurred into sessions, revising my resume again, tweaking keywords, rephrasing achievements, practicing responses aloud, until my reflection in the mirror looked as tired as I felt. Self-doubt took root quickly. Maybe my delayed graduation raised red flags. Maybe my lack of internships made me look inexperienced. Maybe I simply wasn't good enough despite the numbers on paper. I kept applying, kept hoping, but the silence from companies grew deafening. One afternoon at Patterson Financial Services in Savannah, the HR manager, a woman in her 50s with sharp but kind eyes, listened carefully to my answers, then held my gaze longer than usual. She lowered her voice and said, "Jessica, I think you should talk to your parents. Ask them why no one around here will hire you." The words landed like ice water. I drove back to Tybee Island with my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, a cold certainty forming that I didn't want to face. That evening, I walked straight into my father's study at the resort house, the room heavy with the scent of polished wood and scotch. "Dad, why can't I get a job?" He set his papers down slowly, a faint smile curling at the corner of his mouth. "I told them the truth, that you stole from your own family, that you can't be trusted with money." His tone was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. "The gift card you took $1,200 without real permission. Potential employers deserve to know the kind of person they're considering." My stomach twisted. "I paid it back. Every penny. You watched me do it." He shrugged. "That's not how I see it." My mother appeared in the doorway, twisting her hands together, guilt flashing briefly in her eyes before she dropped her gaze to the floor. Aunt Samantha, who had stopped by for dinner, stood just behind her. She flinched visibly when my father added, "She needs to learn respect," but turned her face away, staring at the wall without a word. The silence from both of them cut deeper than the accusation itself. Two women who knew the full story chose to let the lie stand. Gossip moved through the island like the tide. At the beach market, neighbors I'd waved to for years suddenly busied themselves with produce bins, avoiding eye contact as I passed. Church services turned awkward. Conversations hushed when I walked down the aisle, resuming only after I was seated. The close-knit community that once felt welcoming now carried whispers behind my back. My brother Christopher sent a text the next morning. "Still jobless, sis. Dad might have an opening if you don't steal from the cash register." The words burned on the screen, sharp and deliberate. Moments like this betrayal make me wonder how others have handled silent family members. It's those stories that connect us all. Desperation pushed me to apply for the cleaner position at a modest beachfront motel on Tybee Island, the only job listing that asked for no references and no background check. The manager, Amanda Lee, sat behind her cluttered desk and scanned my resume, pausing at the 3.9 GPA and accounting degree before meeting my eyes. "With qualifications like this, why clean rooms?" she asked directly. I answered without hesitation, "Because no one else will hire me. I need to eat." She held my gaze for several seconds, then slid the uniform across the desk. "I care whether you show up on time and get the job done, not what people say." The shifts began at 6 in the morning. For 6 months, I wheeled the heavy cart through narrow hallways, stripping beds, scrubbing toilets, restocking mini fridges, while the ocean roared outside. The work was repetitive and physically draining. The pay barely covered rent, but it belonged to me. No family oversight, no strings. Amanda checked rooms, quietly offered a nod when standards were met, and never pried into the rumors that must have reached her. The routine gave me structure, kept my mind occupied during daylight hours, and slowly rebuilt a fragile sense of control. Then the family hosted a large party event at one of my father's resorts, a celebration for tourism partners and local business owners on the expansive outdoor deck overlooking the water. I was assigned to service the area that night, pushing my cart in the pale blue uniform past tables set with white linens and candlelight. My father noticed me first. He rose from his seat, glass raised, high voice carrying over the music and chatter. "Everyone look! Our daughter has finally found her true calling, scrubbing floors." Heads swiveled, conversations halted, dozens of eyes fixed on me in the wrinkled polyester with yellow rubber gloves dangling from the cart handle. My mother, Ashley, stared down at her plate, cheeks burning red. Her shoulders hunched in silent shame, but offering no defense. My brother Christopher let out a loud laugh that cut through the deck. Missed a spot on the railing, sis, better get to it before someone complains. The mockery echoed, guests exchanging glances, some whispering, others simply staring. Heat flooded my face, humiliation sharp enough to steal my breath. I gripped the cart handle until my knuckles ached, turned my back, and pushed through the service door without a word. The clatter of dishes and fading laughter closed behind me. Inside, something unbreakable took hold. Anger solidified into cold determination, a hardness that hadn't existed before. That night back in my room, I started sorting through an old box of forgotten items to sell for rent money. Buried at the bottom under papers and faded photos was an old phone I'd replaced years earlier. The screen was cracked, battery dead for ages. I plugged it in anyway. Notifications chimed weakly as it powered on, but one email stood out, an old message from lawyer Sarah Reed regarding Grandpa's estate. The subject line read, "Urgent Matthew Hayes estate documents." I opened it, pulse racing. The body was short documents required my signature contact immediately for next steps. My father had replied to every follow-up stating I was not interested and closing the matter. That email led to the call that broke everything open. A month later, the betrayal deepened in a way I never expected. My brother Christopher had been monitoring my Instagram stories closely, screenshotting every post with a location tag or vague hint of progress. He passed them to our father, who cross-referenced them against job boards and figured out my applications. One evening, I logged into an old shared family email account still linked from years ago and found a forwarded thread Christopher had sent Dad. The messages were from my father to Joshua Foster, the plumbing contractor whose company Dad wanted to fold into the resorts for a stronger market hold. "Arranged alliance is the practical move," Dad wrote plainly. "My daughter needs stability after her recent troubles. Your son gets a reliable partner, and our businesses merge seamlessly along the Georgia coast." Joshua responded enthusiastically, outlining terms like contract clauses and timelines, treating my future as a business asset. The words froze me in place. This wasn't guidance. It was a transaction my life bartered for expansion. The shock burned away any remaining hesitation. Escape had to be total now. I redirected my applications farther out, focusing on Johnson Enterprises in Atlanta, a powerhouse investment firm with deep ties to regional tourism. The interview invitation came faster than expected. I drove up in silence, nerves electric the entire way. The building towered, downtown glass and steel catching the sun. Brittany Johnson, the CEO, greeted me in her corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. She was in her early 50s, poised and direct. After a brief exchange about my background, she moved to a wall safe, entered the combination, and withdrew a thick, sealed envelope postmarked 15 years earlier. "Before we talk about the role," she said, handing it over, "your grandfather left this for when you arrived here." I broke the wax seal carefully. Grandpa Matthew's handwriting filled the letter. "I watched your father's grip tighten on your mother Jessica, and feared the same pattern for you. I invested in this company long ago, placing the shares in your name through an irrevocable trust. No one, not him, not anyone, can touch them. This is your freedom when you need it most." The certificate followed 8% founding stake in Johnson Enterprises' current valuation, $2.4 million. The leather journal came last, pages filled with meticulous entries spanning decades. March 2005. Michael forbade Jessica's piano lessons, called them wasteful for a girl. August 2012. Michael dismissed her college ideas. Women marry, they don't build empires. Each line documented the control, the belittling, the isolation. That same morning, my father had called Brittany, voice confident. "Don't hire her. She's a thief, untrustworthy with money." Brittany had listened, then opened the journal while he spoke. She smiled faintly now. "He just attempted to defame a founding shareholder, technically one of my bosses." She leaned forward. I have a proposal. Our annual charity event for Georgia tourism is next month. I want to introduce you as our new senior financial analyst and as an 8% owner. Your father will be there chasing contracts. Let him learn the truth in front of the entire room. The offer hung between us a chance to step out of the shadows he'd kept me in. It's twists like this that make me root for the underdog. Feels like we're all on the same team sometimes. The night of the charity event at the Grand Meridian in Savannah felt charged like the air before a lightning strike. From a private room upstairs, I watched the ballroom fill with Georgia's tourism elite executives in tailored suits, local owners in evening wear, chandeliers casting warm light over white tables, and jazz drifting from the quartet. My father, Michael Smith, worked the room with his usual confidence, shaking hands firmly, laughing at jokes he didn't find funny, positioning himself near anyone who could mean a contract for the resorts. My mother, Ashley, trailed him, her smile fixed but brittle pearls gleaming as she nodded along. Christopher leaned against the bar, scrolling his phone, looking bored and untouchable. They had come to network to advance, never suspecting the ground was about to shift. Brittany Johnson stepped to the microphone after her opening remarks on community and partnership. The room quieted. "Tonight," she said clearly, "I want to introduce someone who represents the values this company was founded on: integrity, resilience, and the courage to claim what's yours. Please welcome our new senior financial analyst and a founding shareholder, Jessica Smith." Applause started politely, then grew as I walked through the side door in a simple navy dress, heels steady on the marble. I reached the stage without glancing at my family. Then the room fractured. A champagne flute shattered Christopher's. My father's face went slack, mouth open mid-sentence with a partner. He shoved forward through the crowd, voice cracking the silence. "She's a thief, I told you this morning." He pointed wildly. "She stole from her family. She's not qualified." Brittany stayed calm, voice carrying effortlessly. "Mr. Smith, you attempted to slander an 8% owner. Her grandfather placed those shares in trust 15 years ago to protect her from precisely this." Gasps rippled through the guests. My father pressed on, rage overtaking reason. "I sabotaged her job applications for 2 years to teach her respect. Daughters don't defy their fathers." My mother grabbed his sleeve, whispering urgently, "Michael, stop, everyone's watching." Christopher stumbled back, knocking over another glass, his phone slipping from his hand. The room held its breath. Brittany let the moment stretch, then added quietly, "The trust is irrevocable, verified public record now. Your words are on record tonight." Whispers exploded into low conversations. My father looked around for support and found empty faces. The family turned and left my father, storming toward the exit, face flushed purple. Mother hurrying after with her head bowed, Christopher trailing last, staring at the floor. No one followed or offered polite excuses. The quartet picked up again, but the energy had changed. 1 month later, I sat in a corner office on the 14th floor of Johnson Enterprises in Atlanta. The city skyline sharp against the morning light through my window. My nameplate was on the door, simple and permanent. I had my own apartment a few blocks away, small, quiet, entirely mine, with fresh flowers on the kitchen table, because I could choose them without explanation. I cut off all contact completely. No replies to calls, no responses to texts, no forgiveness extended. The scandal raced through Georgia's tourism network. My father's resorts saw bookings drop 30% within weeks as partners quietly withdrew, unwilling to risk association with a man who had publicly confessed to sabotaging his daughter for respect. Whispers of a potential defamation suit circulated in industry groups. My mother became isolated, church dinners and social gatherings fading as friends distanced themselves. Christopher lost his promotion. The heir apparent status cracked under the public humiliation. Aunt Samantha severed ties entirely, choosing distance over any attempt at repair. Alone one quiet evening, I opened Grandpa's letter again and read the closing line, "Live free, Jessica." Boundaries with toxic family aren't betrayal, they're survival. Real love protects through deliberate actions, not through control, disguised as care. Sometimes the escape route has been quietly built, long before you realize you're trapped. You just have to keep moving toward it. Reflections like these on boundaries often spark the best conversations. If this story moved you, share it with someone who might relate and subscribe for more. Thank you all for taking the time to watch the video. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos.